Have you ever walked into a room and felt something shift in the air before a single word was spoken? Not because of what was said, but because of how you were seen. There is a moment, so small most people scroll right past it in their memory, that reveals more truth about another person's feelings than 1,000 text messages ever could. It happens in less than 3 seconds. It happens before logic has time to catch up. And once you understand what your brain is actually doing in that moment, you will never look at a simple hello the same way again. Because the truth is, most people are trained to listen to words. But words are the easiest thing in the world to fake. What is almost impossible to fake is the body's first reaction to seeing someone it genuinely cannot wait to be near. Today, we are going to break down exactly what that reaction looks like, why it happens, and why almost nobody notices it in the moment it counts most. Psychologists have spent decades studying what happens in the half second before a greeting. It is called the orientation response, and it is one of the oldest, most primitive signals in the human nervous system. Before the brain even decides what to say, the body has already answered a much older question. Is this person safe, familiar, and wanted or not? That answer shows up in posture, in the direction of the feet, in the speed of the approach, and whether the eyes widen even slightly before the smile arrives. Here is where it gets interesting and where most people get it completely wrong, because a lot of us have been taught that big, loud enthusiasm equals big feelings. A wide grin, a loud hey, arms thrown open. And sure, sometimes that is real, but sometimes it is performance. Something people learn works socially, a habit repeated with everyone from the mailman to their oldest friend. What we are about to talk about is different. It is quieter, it is more involuntary, and it is far more telling because it cannot be rehearsed the same way every single time for every single person without the nervous system giving something away. There is a very specific pattern researchers have documented in people who feel genuine deep attraction towards someone, a pattern that shows up the instant they notice that person in a room. And once you know what it looks like, you will start seeing it everywhere, in restaurants, at parties, at the door when someone comes home. But here is the part that changes everything, the part most people never think to ask. This pattern does not just show interest. It reveals something about how safe, how nervous, and how emotionally invested that person actually is around you in ways their words might be actively hiding. Let's slow down for a second because I want you to really picture this. Imagine you walk into a coffee shop and someone you have been seeing for a few weeks is already sitting at a table. Now imagine two completely different versions of what happens next. In the first version, he glances up, gives a casual nod, maybe a small wave, and goes back to his phone until you actually sit down. In the second version, something different happens in his body before his mind even catches up. His torso turns fully towards you. His feet, which are one of the most honest parts of the human body because we almost never consciously control them, point directly at you, even if he is still talking to someone else. There might be a tiny pause, almost invisible, where he just watches you walk in before he even smiles. That pause is not nothing. That pause is the nervous system saying something the mouth has not caught up to yet. Here is where I need you to keep watching because the next part explains something that most relationship experts almost or never talk about. And it is the piece that ties all of this together into something you can actually use in real life starting today. Human beings are at their core wired for efficiency. Our brains are constantly trying to save energy, which is why we go on autopilot for almost everything. Brushing our teeth, walking familiar routes, greeting people we see every day. Autopilot greetings are fast, low effort, and mildly enthusiastic at best because the brain has already filed that person under familiar and safe and does not need to spend extra resources reacting to them. But something fascinating happens when the brain has not fully filed a person under safe yet, when there is still uncertainty, longing, or emotional stakes involved. The greeting stops being automatic. It becomes deliberate, even if the person doing it has no idea they are doing it deliberately. This is why you will sometimes notice someone who is usually calm and composed suddenly fumbling their words, laughing a little too quickly, or repeating a greeting because the first one did not feel like enough. That awkwardness is not weakness, it is data. It is the nervous system working overtime because it cares about the outcome of this specific interaction more than it cares about the outcome of interactions with people who barely register on its emotional radar. Think about the people in your life who you feel nothing for, romantically speaking, a coworker you're friendly with, a cousin you see at holidays. The way you greet them is smooth, predictable, almost scripted, because your brain has no emotional stakes riding on their reaction to you. Now think about someone you have actually had real feelings for, someone whose opinion of you genuinely mattered. Chances are, at some point, your own greeting toward them was clumsier, more eager, or oddly overthought, not because you are awkward as a person, but because your nervous system knew this interaction actually mattered. This is the first layer of what we're uncovering today, and it is the foundation for everything else. Genuine attraction disrupts automatic behavior. It does not always make people smoother. Sometimes it makes them a little rougher around the edges because the stakes just went up in their mind, even if they would never admit that out loud. Now, let's go one layer deeper because posture and pauses are only part of the story. The next thing to understand involves something called proxemics, which is simply the psychological study of personal space and how we use physical distance to communicate feelings we are not saying out loud. Every human being carries an invisible bubble of space around them, and the size of that bubble shrinks or expands depending on how emotionally close we feel to another person. With strangers, that bubble is large. With close friends, it shrinks. With people we are attracted to, something curious happens. The bubble becomes inconsistent, almost like it is negotiating with itself in real time. You might notice someone lean in slightly more than necessary during a hug, holding it half a second longer than a typical friendly embrace, then pulling back almost too quickly as if catching themselves. You might notice someone who normally shakes hands or gives a quick side hug suddenly go for a full frontal hug instead, without fully realizing they just changed the rules of how they usually greet people. These small inconsistencies matter more than grand gestures because grand gestures can be planned, but these tiny negotiations of space happen faster than conscious thought. There is also something psychologists call mirroring, which shows up heavily in greetings between two people who feel a real pull toward each other. If you find yourself instinctively tilting your head the same way someone tilts theirs, crossing your arms when they cross theirs, or matching the exact tone and pace of their hello, that is not a coincidence. Mirroring is one of the clearest, most unconscious signs that someone's brain has already decided on some level that you are worth paying close attention to. We do not mirror people we feel indifferent toward. We mirror people we are trying, without even realizing it, to feel closer to. Now, here is something that will genuinely surprise you, something most people completely misunderstand about greetings and attraction. We tend to assume that confidence equals interest, that the person who greets us the smoothest, most charmingly, must be the one who likes us the most. But real psychological research on attraction tells a more complicated story. Confidence and comfort are not the same thing as genuine emotional investment. In fact, sometimes the smoothest greeter is the person who has greeted 100 people the exact same charming way, because it is a well-practiced social tool, not a specific response to you. What you actually want to pay attention to is contrast, not how smooth someone's greeting is in general, but how different their greeting towards you is compared to how they greet everyone else. This is the detail almost nobody thinks to track because we get so caught up in whether a greeting felt nice in the moment, we forget to zoom out and ask, is this how they treat everyone, or is this specifically how they treat me? If someone gives every person in the room the same wide smile, the same enthusiastic hello, the same warm hug, that tells you they are a warm person in general, which is lovely, but it does not tell you anything specific about how they feel about you. But if you notice their energy visibly change the second they spot you specifically, if their voice drops slightly, if they suddenly stand up straighter, if their eyes do a subtle double take before the smile even forms, that shift is meaningful precisely because it is not their default setting for everyone else. This is why paying attention over time matters more than reading a single moment in isolation. One good greeting could be a fluke, good mood, good day, nothing to do with you specifically, but a pattern, a repeated, consistent shift in some energy every single time they see you, compared to how they interact with literally everyone else around them. That pattern is one of the most reliable signals in all of human attraction research. Let's talk about eye behavior for a moment, because this is where things get especially fascinating from a psychological standpoint. There is a well-documented phenomenon called pupil dilation that happens involuntarily when we look at someone we find attractive or emotionally significant. Our pupils widen slightly, completely outside of our conscious control, as a physiological response tied to arousal in the broadest sense, meaning heightened attention and interest, not something someone can control any more than they can control their heartbeat. Now, most of us are not close enough or paying close enough attention to consciously notice pupil size in real time. But we do notice something adjacent to it, something our brains process instinctively even when we cannot name it. And that is the intensity and duration of eye contact during a greeting. Notice how long someone holds eye contact with you the moment they see you, before they look away to say hello to someone else, before their attention gets pulled elsewhere. Genuine attraction tends to create a kind of eye contact that lingers just a beat longer than casual politeness requires, followed sometimes by a quick glance away, almost like the brain briefly overwhelmed itself with its own reaction and needed a second to recover. This lingering and retreating pattern, sometimes called eye contact breaking under pressure, shows up again and again in psychological studies of romantic attraction. And it is remarkably consistent across different cultures and different types of relationships. Contrast that with someone who is simply being polite. Polite eye contact tends to be steady, brief, and evenly distributed, giving everyone in a room roughly the same amount of visual attention. Attraction-based eye contact tends to be uneven, more intense in short bursts, sometimes almost too intense, which is why it can feel a little disarming when it happens, like being seen a little too clearly for comfort. Now, I want to bring all of this together with something that ties directly into attachment theory, which is one of the most well-researched areas in modern relationship psychology. Attachment theory tells us that human beings develop patterns formed early in life that shape how we behave when we feel emotionally invested in someone. People with more anxious attachment patterns often show heightened, almost nervous energy in greetings with people they care about, because part of them is subconsciously seeking reassurance that the connection is still there. People with more avoidant patterns might actually seem more reserved or controlled in a greeting with someone they deeply care about, not because they feel less, but because vulnerability feels threatening to them. So their nervous system tries to keep things calm and low key, even when internally there is a storm happening. This is important because it means there is no single universal greeting that proves attraction across every single person on earth. What matters is the deviation from someone's baseline. Someone with an anxious attachment style showing extra warmth is meaningful. Someone with an avoidant attachment style showing even a small crack in their usual composure, a slightly longer pause, a slightly warmer tone than their normal reserved energy, that crack can be just as significant, maybe even more significant, because it costs that person more to show it. This is why understanding greetings on a psychological level requires you to know a person over time, not just analyze a single interaction in a vacuum. The goal is never to become someone who obsessively overanalyzes every hello, looking for hidden meaning behind everything. That kind of hyper vigilance actually damages relationships because it turns connection into a constant test rather than something you get to simply experience and enjoy. The goal instead is to build a quieter, more grounded kind of awareness, one where you notice patterns over weeks and months rather than panicking over the interpretation of a single Tuesday afternoon hello. Here's something that might change the way you think about all of this. So much of modern dating advice focuses on what to say, the perfect text, the perfect opening line, the perfect witty comeback. But words are conscious. Words can be edited, rehearsed, sent and deleted, and rewritten 5 times before they are actually sent. The body, in that first split second of a greeting, has none of that luxury. It reacts before strategy kicks in. This is exactly why paying attention to greetings, more than paying attention to any carefully worded message, gives you a truer glimpse into what is actually happening beneath the surface of how someone feels about you. There is also a fascinating psychological concept called emotional leakage, a term used to describe moments when our true internal state slips out despite our best efforts to control it. Emotional leakage happens most often in unguarded, low pressure moments. And few moments are lower pressure or more unguarded than the instant someone notices a person they care about walking into a room. In that moment, before social scripts and strategic thinking have time to take over, there is a tiny window where the truth simply leaks out in a flicker of the eyes, a change in breathing, a subtle straightening of the spine. This is why some of the most emotionally honest moments in any relationship do not happen during deep planned conversations. They happen in these tiny, almost forgettable seconds. The door opening, the coffee shop entrance, the parking lot wave. We tend to treat these moments as background noise, filler before the real interaction begins. But psychologically speaking, these moments often contain more honest information than the entire conversation that follows. I want you to think back now to a specific moment in your own life. A time someone greeted you in a way that felt different, that felt like something shifted in the air the second they saw you. Maybe you brushed it off at the time. Maybe you told yourself you were imagining things, reading too much into it, being silly. But your nervous system picked up on something real in that moment, something that words alone were never going to give you. Because your body is remarkably good at detecting genuine emotional investment in others, even when your conscious mind tries to talk you out of trusting that instinct. This is ultimately what makes greetings such a powerful window into how someone truly feels. Not because a single hello can tell you everything about a relationship. It cannot, and no responsible psychologist would ever suggest otherwise. But because greetings are one of the few moments in daily life where the nervous system speaks before the mind has time to filter, edit, or perform. And when you learn to notice the pattern, not a single instance, but the consistent repeated pattern over time, you start to understand something most people go their entire lives without consciously realizing. That the truth about how someone feels about you is very rarely hidden in what they say. It is hidden in the half second before they say anything at all. So here is what I want you to do. The next time you are about to see someone whose feelings towards you have been unsure about, do not walk in expecting a performance. Do not focus on the words they choose to greet you with. Instead, watch the first half second. Watch where their feet point. Watch whether their body turns fully towards you or only partially. Watch how their eyes behave before the smile even fully forms. Watch whether their energy toward you is different from their energy toward everyone else in the room, because that contrast is where the real answer lives. And remember, this is not about becoming paranoid or turning every interaction into a forensic investigation. It is about learning to trust the quiet, honest signals your own nervous system has probably already picked up on long before your conscious mind caught up. Attraction, real, genuine emotional investment in another person, is remarkably hard to fake consistently over time because it is not really a performance in the first place. It is a nervous system response. And nervous systems, unlike carefully chosen words, are notoriously bad at lying. Before you go, I want to ask you something, and I would genuinely love to hear your answer in the comments below. Think about the people in your life, past or present, and think about that very first moment they saw you walk into a room. Was there a moment where you noticed their energy shift the second they saw you? Something in their posture, their eyes, their voice that told you more than their words ever could. Tell me about that moment in the comments. I read every single one. And I would love to know if this changes the way you think about the greetings in your own life going forward.